The Mass Effect series has a wealth of stories, many of which go beyond what we can play in-game. Across novels, comic books, movies, and more, Mass Effect's extended media offers deep dives into the characters we know and love from the games, and even shows us entirely original characters who exist only on the pages or scenes in these stories. With so much to dig into, the extended media can be pretty overwhelming, so let this video serve as your guide to the wider world of Mass Effect. This video has 3 main sections. The first will cover every piece of officially released, story-based Mass Effect media in the order they were debuted. If you're interested in experiencing the series in release order, or are otherwise generally interested in Mass Effect's release history, this section is for you. The second section covers all the multimedia stories in chronological order. This section will be most helpful for players looking to experience the entire series sequentially, from the earliest days of the First Contact War to the adventures in the Andromeda Galaxy. The third section features my recommended order for the complete Mass Effect experience. This section is best suited for both brand new players and returning players who want a more engaging experience of the games. " 2007 was the beginning of Mass Effect, and the very first piece of official media was the novel Revelation. It tells the story of a young David Anderson and is a prequel to the first game, which launched a few months later in the year. Mass Effect 1 featured 2 DLC packs, Bring Down the Sky and Pinnacle Station, which were released in 2008 and 2009 respectively. The other major release of 2008 was the novel Ascension, a sequel to the first book set just a few months after the conclusion of the first game. It tells the story of Kaylee Sanders protecting a young biotic prodigy from Cerberus operatives out to kidnap her for nefarious experiments. In 2009, the first Mass Effect mobile game was released. Galaxy features Jacob Taylor as the protagonist, investigating a Batarian plot to attack the Citadel. Sadly, it is no longer available for purchase and is nearly impossible to get your hands on. Thankfully, a full playthrough of the game can be found on YouTube. Ahead of the release of the next game, the first Mass Effect comic series debuted. Redemption ran from January to April of 2010, and it features Liara T'Soni as the protagonist, searching for Shepard after a devastating attack on the SSV Normandy. Mass Effect 2 released early in 2010 and featured a handful of DLCs, the most notable being Overlord, Lair of the Shadow Broker, and Arrival. Midway through 2010 came the release of the short comic Incursion, starring Arya T'Loak. And about a month later, the third novel in the series was published. Retribution is a direct sequel to the previous book, continuing the stories of Kaylee Sanders and Paul Grayson. In 2011, the next comic series debuted. Evolution ran from January to April and is one of the earliest stories in the timeline, set during the time of the First Contact War. Later in the year, James Vega is first introduced in the short comic Conviction, showing how he got to where he is at the beginning of the third game. From October 2011 to January 2012 ran the comic series Invasion, which establishes the story arc that is later explored in Mass Effect 3's Omega DLC. Early in 2012, the novel Deception was published. This was a highly controversial book, to say the least. As a result, most Mass Effect fans generally do not consider this a canon entry in the series. Mass Effect 3 launched on March 6, 2012, and later added the DLC packs Leviathan, Omega, and Citadel. It was also the first game in the series to feature an online multiplayer mode. On the same day as Mass Effect 3's release, the mobile game Infiltrator launched. Like the other mobile title, this game is no longer available to purchase, but there are several full playthroughs on YouTube. The next major comic series, Homeworlds, ran from April to August of 2012, and it features stories focusing on Garrus Vakarian, Liara T'Soni, James Vega, and Tali'Zorah. In between this run, the short comic Inquisition was published, which tells more of Captain Bailey's story before Mass Effect 3. On N7 Day 2012, fans were treated to the release of Blasto, Eternity is Forever, a comic featuring the famous Hanar Spectre. To cap off the year, the only Mass Effect movie to date premiered. Paragon Lost is an animated film featuring James Vega, depicting the events of a collector attack on the colony Fel Prime. In 2013, the short comic He Who Laughs Best was published, which tells the story of how Joker earned his role as the pilot of the Normandy. In the middle of the year, the comic series Foundation debuted. It is a tie-in to the Citadel DLC and provides a deeper look into the backstories of many of the Normandy crew. This is the longest comic in the series, running for a year from July 2013 to July 2014. This was the last piece of official Mass Effect media until 2017, which saw the launch of Mass Effect Andromeda. Unfortunately, there were no story DLCs for this game, but it did feature a multiplayer mode similar to the previous games. On the same day as Andromeda, the novel Nexus Uprising was published, offering a more intimate perspective of the tribulations the Nexus endured upon reaching the new galaxy. From May to October of 2017 ran the comic series Discovery, which is a prequel to Andromeda set in the Milky Way galaxy, around the time of Mass Effect 2. In November 2017, the novel Initiation was published, which is also a prequel to Andromeda, and features protagonist Cora Harper on a covert mission to retrieve stolen Initiative technology. Nearly a year later, the final Andromeda tie-in novel is published. Annihilation tells the story of a chaotic string of days aboard the Quarian Ark Kelessia on its way to the Andromeda Galaxy. This was the last piece of official Mass Effect media until about 2 years later, when the complete comics was published. This collection bundles every comic ever released up to this point, making it the most convenient way to read these stories. Not long after, the Mass Effect Legendary Edition launched, which features remastered versions of the Mass Effect trilogy with most of the DLC content seamlessly integrated into the experience. This was the final game released up to now, where the next official piece of media to look for is the Mass Effect board game, Priority Hagalaz, which is scheduled to release in October 2024. In the future, we hope to see the next Mass Effect game, which was announced in 2020. There is currently no confirmed release window for the title. As a preface for the Mass Effect chronology, it must be noted that most stories and events on the timeline are not precise. In many instances, the most we know is the general year that a story takes place. Exact dates are nearly impossible to determine from the text, so some approximations have been made using context clues. Some stories, such as Foundation and Homeworlds, take place over the course of many years and are framed by events that occur later in the timeline. In these cases, dates have been determined from the primary focus of the story, not the framed elements. The earliest point we can read in the Mass Effect timeline is found in the prologue of Revelation, which takes place in the year 2157 and is told from the perspective of John Grissom in the days before the beginning of the First Contact War. Not long after, the events of Evolution begin, showing the final days of the First Contact War and the origins of Cerberus. Several years later, in 2161, the first issue of Foundation takes place, showing the unfortunate beginnings of future Cerberus agent Maya Brooks. In 2165, Revelation continues, depicting a young David Anderson on a covert mission for the Alliance, leading to his candidacy for the Spectres. In 2168, issue number 4 of Foundation details a young Kaidan Alenko's experience on Gagarin Station, the space station also known as Jump Zero, which is the original training facility for human biotics. In the year 2175, issue number 10 of Foundation shows Kasumi Goto and her partner Keiji launch a daring heist that doesn't go according to plan. In 2176, Homeworlds depicts a young James Vega struggling over his challenging relationship with his father and contemplating joining the Alliance military. Fast forward around 7 years to 2183, a year in which a handful of stories are set. The first of which is Galaxy, which sees Jacob Taylor fighting off Batarian terrorists aiming to attack the Citadel. Sometime later, the events of He Who Laughs Best occur, depicting Jeff Joker Moreau earning the role of Normandy's pilot. Then, Homeworlds shows the beginning of Tally's pilgrimage and the events that lead her to the Citadel. Shortly after, issue number 2 of Foundation takes place, depicting Rex's hunt for Fist and eventual arrest by C-Sec. Around the same time, issue number 3 of Foundation occurs, showing the beginning of the Geth attack on Eden Prime from the perspective of Ashley Williams. This immediately leads into the events of Mass Effect 1 and Commander Shepard's investigation into the rogue Spectre Saren Arterius. Sometime later, the events of Incursion take place, showing Arya T'Loak learning about the Collector's plans to attack humanity. In the months after the Geth attack on the Citadel, the events of Ascension take place, depicting Cerberus's attempted abduction of Gillian Grayson from Grissom Academy. Around the same time, the prologue of Mass Effect 2 occurs, showing the Collectors destroying the SSV Normandy. Not long after, issue number 5 of Foundation depicts Miranda Lawson recruiting Jacob Taylor to Cerberus for a mission to locate the missing Commander Shepard. This mission is continued in issue number 6 of Foundation. Soon after, the events of Redemption occur, showing Liara T'Soni's attempt to locate the missing Commander Shepard. Around the same time, the beginning of the film Paragon Lost takes place, showing Alliance Marines defending the colony of Fel Prime from a Bloodpack assault. Sometime in the year 2184, issue number 7 of Foundation shows Jack assaulting a Cerberus base and getting more than she bargained for. Issue number 8 of Foundation depicts the Cerberus agent Rasa infiltrating the Spectre offices on the Citadel to recover classified intel on Commander Shepard for the Lazarus Project. Issue number 9 of Foundation reveals how Professor Morden Solis and the Solarian Special Tasks Group deployed their work on the Genophage Modification Project. Issue number 11 of Foundation shows the bounty hunter Zaid Masani's attempt to hijack the Turian military frigate, the Verican. Issue number 12 of Foundation depicts the vengeful assassin Thane Krios hunting down the mercenaries who killed his wife. Issue number 13 of Foundation shows Rasa's defection from Cerberus and the theft of a pod containing a clone of Commander Shepard. Late in 2184, the events of Initiation begin, showing Cora's first mission with the Andromeda Initiative. Around the same time, the events of Discovery begin, depicting Tyrion Kandros' investigation of a link between the Geth and the Andromeda Initiative. At some point in 2184, the events of Blasto, Eternity is Forever occur. As a note, this story is likely an in-universe movie similar to the other Blasto features. In 2185, Homeworlds shows Garrus forming a band of vigilantes to take on the gangs of Omega. This leads back into Mass Effect 2 and Shepard's investigation into the abduction of human colonies by the Collectors. Around the same time, the rest of Paragon Lost takes place, showing the Collector attack on Fel Prime. Sometime early in the year 2186, the events of Retribution occur, depicting the race to locate Paul Grayson before the Reapers take over his body. In the same year, the events of Inquisition take place, showing how Captain Armando Bailey was promoted to commander of CSEC. Soon after, the events of Conviction occur, showing James Vega reeling in the aftermath of the attack on Fel Prime. Sometime later, Invasion depicts Aria's battle against Cerberus as the organization seizes control of Omega. Later, Homeworlds reveals Liara's desperate attempt to prepare for the incoming Reaper invasion and her discovery of a weapon that could win the coming war. Shortly after, Infiltrator depicts Cerberus agent Randall Esno going rogue after realizing the evil nature of the organization. At the same time, the Reaper War begins in Mass Effect 3. Sometime after completing assignment Priority Rannoch, the events of the board game Priority Hagalaz occur. Afterward, Mass Effect 3 continues to the conclusion of the Reaper War. Jumping forward 567 years, Annihilation depicts members of Sleepwalker Team Blue 7 being awoken from cryostasis on the Ark Aquilacia to investigate a potential contagion that threatens every species on the Ark. 65 years later, Nexus Uprising shows the station's arrival in the Andromeda Galaxy, and the initial collision with the mysterious space anomaly called the Scourge. A year later, the Ark Hyperion arrives in the Helios Cluster, beginning the events of Mass Effect Andromeda. As fun as it is to go through every Mass Effect story chronologically, it isn't exactly suitable for fans who are brand new to the series. Obviously, playing through the games is a perfect way to get started. For those interested in getting the complete perspective of the series, however, I've made an optimal order for incorporating all the necessary and easily available multimedia into your Mass Effect experience. This recommended order for watching, reading, and playing all the series has to offer is suited both for people who are completely new to the world of Mass Effect, as well as longtime fans looking to dive into the expanded media for the first time or beyond. The comics and novels feature so many themes and storylines, and they don't necessarily have a unified narrative goal. So, this recommended order prioritizes the impact of learning specific lore and character information associated with each story. They've been carefully placed in a sequence that will provide the most impactful and meaningful experience of the series. I've separated the stories into 4 stages. This is more for organization and ease of tracking your progress, rather than a precise separation into larger acts that serve a story structure. That said, you can find one of the 4 main Mass Effect games in each stage, with the only exception being Mass Effect 2, which I've split across stages 1 and 2. If it's your first time playing Mass Effect, the reason for this will be clear after playing and reading the media associated with Mass Effect 2. If you've already played the games, then you know what I'm talking about. The stories in each stage mostly relate to the primary game in that section, but there are some exceptions such as Initiation and Discovery, which are Andromeda-centric stories, but they occur roughly around this point in the Mass Effect chronology. Plus, I find that placing them in Stage 2 of the overall Mass Effect experience helps seed Stage 4 and Andromeda much better, making it feel like a more organic part of the series. My final note regards the various DLCs. You'll notice that I haven't made specific considerations for the DLCs in Mass Effect 2, as they can be played at almost any point in your playthrough and still make sense. Although, I think saving the Arrival DLC for after the main story is the most optimal approach. For Mass Effect 3, I've made a point to save the Citadel DLC for after the main story. While it's completely alright if you want to play it sooner, I believe the DLC is best saved for an epilogue of sorts to everything you've experienced up to that point. This placement also takes into account the fact that it was the final DLC released for the trilogy, and was the last thing many Mass Effect fans played at the time. So there you have it, the optimal order for getting the complete Mass Effect experience so far. I hope you enjoy. Thanks for watching. If you end up checking out any of the Mass Effect extended media, please leave a comment to let me know which ones were your favorites. If you're curious to know more about these novels, comics, and movies, check out my Mass Effect multimedia playlist, which now has videos covering every easily available story in the franchise. Hopefully, we'll be getting new Mass Effect stories soon, and when new novels, comics, or anything else is released, I'll post videos updating you on what's canon in the franchise, so stay tuned. If you liked this video, be on the lookout for my upcoming discussions on theories and speculation about the next Mass Effect. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.